And there is Sir Keir Starmer, who will become Britain's 58th Prime Minister.
Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party is projected to win Canada's federal election.
At this time, Nine projects the election is won by Labor. There is no path for the Liberal Party or the coalition to win. Albo gets a second go and Labor wins the election.
3 countries, 3 elections, one almost identical yet devastating outcome across all 3 for Conservatives. Australia's Conservatives were annihilated at the ballot box and their leader was thrown out alongside them. In Canada, the Conservative Party was stunned by a loss that had seemed almost impossible, with even their leader losing his own seat. In the United Kingdom, the Tories, the oldest Conservative party in the world, were battered into political irrelevance and their historic majority was wiped away. Oddly, and perhaps even eerily, the reasons for these losses are strikingly similar across all 3 countries. Every time I've covered these nations, their political trajectories have seemed strangely synchronized. Different nations, same voter rage. Different flags, same electoral collapse. Why is conservatism suddenly imploding across the English-speaking world? Are we witnessing the end of an era? Or is this just the beginning of something far more troubling? There are multiple reasons for these electoral wipeouts. Let's consider one key factor all 3 countries share: the expanding welfare state. Australia, Canada, and the UK have transformed into giant redistribution machines, reliant on increasing taxpayer contributions. Welfare isn't just for the poor anymore. Even the wealthy benefit through generous tax incentives, property perks, and cushy retirement schemes, many introduced by Conservative governments alongside ever-growing bureaucracies. However, here's the political paradox. While voters increasingly depend on welfare programs, Conservatives in each nation unwisely threaten cutbacks at exactly the wrong moment, following a global pandemic and during severe inflation. The backlash was swift and brutal. In Britain, the Conservatives disastrously timed their tough talk on welfare, with inflation peaking above 11% in late 2022 and stubbornly remaining high into 2023. Brits faced crippling energy bills, soaring grocery prices, and collapsing public services. NHS waiting lists reached record levels, with over 7 million waiting for treatment. So when the Tories proposed slashing £12 billion from welfare, mainly by toughening disability assessments, it appeared heartless, not disciplined. Voters saw a government attempting to balance budgets on the backs of vulnerable citizens already struggling. The result? Conservatives lost over 1,000 council seats in the 2023 local elections, and by the 2024 general election, their majority vanished completely. In Australia, the coalition floated public service cuts despite voters vividly recalling their stingy approach to job seeker payments and healthcare funding disputes. Their cost-cutting proposals fell flat as the government successfully painted them as reckless during a period when expensive disability schemes like the NDIS approached $100 billion annually. Peter Dutton pushed ahead regardless, and voters swiftly punished him, causing a sharp 5-point primary vote drop and ejecting him from his own seat. Canada faced a similar scenario. Pierre Poilievre appeared set for victory, but his aggressive pledge to cut the federal deficit by 70% raised alarm bells. His proposals targeting foreign aid, public broadcasting, and consultants began resembling traditional austerity, unsettling voters who were still recovering from inflation and reliant on social programs. The Liberals capitalised, promising stability and expansion of dental care, housing, and childcare. Precisely what Poilievre's cuts seemed to threaten. Suburban voters flipped, handing the Liberals an unexpected win, with Poilievre shockingly losing his own seat as well. In all 3 countries, slashing or even hinting at welfare cuts proved politically disastrous when voters felt economically vulnerable. Conservatives may rail against big government, but voters clearly view the welfare state as a safety net rather than a burden. Welfare wasn't the only self-inflicted wound. Another critical factor behind Conservatives' defeats was the blatant hypocrisy voters observed between their promises and actual performance in office. Voters recognised that the Conservatives were in fact exactly what they accused the left of being. Take mass immigration. often used as a cheat code to boost GDP by expanding the taxpayer base, as I've covered before. UK Conservatives campaigned passionately on taking back control of borders post-Brexit, equating Brexit with reduced immigration. Yes, under their watch, the UK experienced a record high net migration exceeding 600,000 annually, the largest surge in British history. Voters noticed this glaring contradiction, especially in working class areas, fueling Labor's gains in former Tory strongholds. Australia's coalition displayed similar hypocrisy. Despite strong border rhetoric, they oversaw a temporary visa explosion that profoundly impacted housing markets and worsened affordability. Younger Australians, increasingly locked out of home ownership, noticed a disconnect between the coalition's words and actions, significantly hurting Conservatives in key suburban battlegrounds. Canada's Conservatives also suffered credibility issues. Pierre Poilievre projected firmness on immigration, advocating controlled migration. However, the Liberals effectively countered by highlighting that some of Canada's highest immigration levels occurred under Stephen Harper's Conservative government, of which Poilievre was a leading figure. The Liberals branded Poilievre as hypocritical for criticising policies his own party had implemented, severely damaging his credibility among voters concerned about housing and stretched public services. Housing affordability exposed perhaps the starkest Conservative hypocrisy. Despite Conservatives frequently blaming left-wing policies, housing prices soared fastest during Conservative rule in all three countries. UK prices escalated dramatically under Tory governments, making home ownership unattainable for young Britons. In Australia, the coalition presided over a severe housing boom, leaving home ownership out of reach for millions. Canada similarly experienced housing spikes under Conservative leadership, notably in Toronto and Vancouver. Voters recognised these contradictions, viewing Conservatives not as solutions but as contributors to crises they purportedly opposed. Swing voters felt betrayed by politicians who promised solutions but delivered the opposite. The result? A devastating credibility crisis, turning previously safe Conservative seats into opposition territory. Hypocrisy, it turns out, isn't just politically damaging, it's fatal. Something else that is fatal for Conservatives and general opposition to the modern left is censorship and suppression of opposing voices like mine on this platform. And this is why, if you're enjoying this video so far, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out because of an algorithm. Another significant factor damaging Conservatives in Australia and Canada was Donald Trump, or more specifically, the Trump factor. Simply put, aligning or appearing aligned with Trump's brand of politics became electoral poison outside the United States. In Australia, Peter Dutton was swiftly labelled Timu Trump by critics, effectively undermining his reputation.
Prime Minister, why would you invite Donald Trump to Australia when you've got a Timu Trump sitting right opposite you?
His opposition to initiatives like the Indigenous Voice to Parliament and his tough stance against DEI programs were portrayed as Trump-style culture wars. While Australian Conservatives argued these policies were reactions to left-driven initiatives, voters perceived otherwise. Urban electorates in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane recoiled at perceived connections to American MAGA-style populism. Coupled with US-inspired policies and economic proposals, Conservatives faced catastrophic losses in metropolitan areas, precisely where Dutton needed gains. Canada faced a similar dynamic. Pierre Poilievre was overshadowed by a Trump-like image, largely due to his support for the 2022 Freedom Convoy and controversial crypto advocacy. Trump's 2025 return and subsequent aggressive trade tariffs targeting Canada renewed anxiety around America First policies harming Canadians financially. The Liberals seized this opportunity, successfully branding Poilievre as aligned with Trump's divisive nationalism. In fact, surveys showed that for boomers in Canada, their number one issue was dealing with Trump while making Canada a better place to live came in last. Polling that showed the Conservatives headed towards a comfortable win in the elections soon switched almost overnight, with the Liberals, now headed by Mark Carney, comfortably winning what was before Trump an unwinnable election. Many Conservative commentators misread these dynamics, wrongly believing Trump's populism successful in the US, could transfer seamlessly to Australia and Canada. However, political systems in these countries, particularly Australia's mandatory voting and preferential ballots, inherently resist populism and force centrist appeals. Additionally, voters in both nations viewed alignment with Trump's trade policies as betrayal of national interests. Dutton and Poilievre themselves weren't Trumpian populists, yet the association alone was damaging enough. The Trump label delivered a decisive blow in both campaigns, a cautionary lesson the UK Conservatives are likely observing closely. But there's a deeper, structural crisis confronting conservatism across these three countries, a demographic shift that's harder to resolve. The Conservative voter base is shrinking, aging, and geographically isolated. Demographics, as they say, is destiny. Take young voters. Conservatives across the Anglosphere are rapidly losing youth support. In the UK, the Tories secured a mere 8% of voters under 30, a catastrophic loss. Australia's Liberal National Coalition similarly lost young voters completely, effectively handing Labor and the Greens lasting dominance among youth. Even Canada's Conservatives captured only about 25% of the under 30 vote, hardly a strong foundation for future growth. This decline largely stems from Conservatives' failure to address the issues young people prioritise. Today's younger generation is priced out of home ownership, burdened by debt, faces stagnant wages, rising costs of living, and job competition intensified by mass immigration and automation. Conservatives' reliance on dated solutions, trickle-down economics, small government rhetoric, and cultural debates feels disconnected, even insulting to those struggling financially. Why should young generations vote for Conservatives when they have nothing to conserve? Educated women pose another demographic challenge. Australia's affluent suburbs experience the teal wave, highly educated, moderate women rejecting perceived outdated, culture war-driven conservatism in favour of progressive independence. The UK witnessed similar shifts as affluent, educated women abandoned the Tories for Labor and Lib Dems, while in Canada, women voters initially swayed by economic messaging ultimately returned to Liberals concerned about public programs and economic security. Finally, immigration and ethnic minority voters represent perhaps conservatism's most critical blind spot. Rapid mass immigration into urban centres created powerful voting blocs, wary of parties perceived as nativist. In Canada's Peel region, Australia's Western Sydney, and London's diverse boroughs, subtle anti-immigrant rhetoric drove these communities decisively leftward, permanently altering political landscapes. Collectively, these demographic shifts pose existential threats to traditional conservatism. Unless Conservatives adapt and appeal to young voters, educated women, and diverse immigrant communities, their defeats will likely grow deeper and more permanent. Now, while Conservatives stumbled, the left seized their moment effectively. In all three countries, progressive leaders positioned themselves as stable, competent alternatives, contrasting sharply with conservative chaos. Labor's Keir Starmer, Australia's Anthony Albanese, and Canada's Mark Carney were intentionally unflashy, offering dependable leadership after periods of political turbulence. Starmer presented himself as Britain's cautious manager, promising disciplined governance and clear objectives. Albanese embraced his steady Albo persona, highlighting Australia's renewed global role through initiatives like AUKUS and clean energy employment. Carney leveraged his technocratic background to reassure Canadians of stable economic management during uncertain times. Progressives also cleverly redefined patriotism, traditionally a conservative strength. In Canada, opposition to Trump-era tariffs was framed by Liberals and the NDP as protecting national pride and economic sovereignty, undermining Poilievre's perceived alignment with Trump. UK Labor united voters around restoring national pride and competence through targeted investment in infrastructure, healthcare, and green technology. Albanese in Australia combined patriotic national security messaging with economic nationalism around clean energy industries and sustainable jobs, leaving Conservatives portrayed as ineffective or unpatriotic. Strategic voting and tactical alliances further strengthened progressive victories. UK voters coordinated unprecedented tactical voting against the Tories. Australia's Labor strategically avoided conflict with popular independent Teal candidates to maximise anti-coalition votes. In Canada, NDP supporters strategically voted Liberal in crucial suburban regions, amplifying progressive success. In essence, the left didn't merely win, they systematically capitalised on Conservative errors, skillfully reframing patriotism, emphasising competence over chaos, and leveraging tactical alliances for maximum electoral impact. So what does this mean for the future of conservatism in these three countries? At this pivotal moment, Conservatives face two stark paths: rebuild or radicalise. If they're serious about rebuilding, Conservatives must start by acknowledging reality. Embracing pro-family welfare policies could help win back young families and middle-class voters feeling the pinch. A credible, ambitious climate plan, no longer treated as political kryptonite, might finally attract younger voters concerned about their futures. This is similar to the left wing in Denmark embracing opposition against mass immigration, effectively wiping out their right-wing opposition. And to seriously tackle their biggest blind spot, housing affordability, Conservatives need bold policies rather than relying on short-term market tweaks that are nothing more than band-aid fixes. As their boomer voter base dies out, these are needed in order to win the young vote again. New leadership will also be essential. After Peter Dutton's stunning defeat, Australia's coalition has an opportunity to pivot back to the centre and reconnect with suburban voters who abandoned them. Similarly, Canada's Conservatives following Poilievre's shock loss may find renewal by choosing pragmatism and less divisive rhetoric. And in Britain, the Tories must heal their internal divisions and decide clearly what and who they stand for before reform completely cannibalises their vote. Ultimately, this isn't about one bad election cycle. It's a defining moment for conservatism itself. And no, I don't think the right is guaranteed a comeback next time either. Their opponents didn't win by offering radical change. They won by effectively offering to manage decline a bit more steadily and for a bit longer. If Conservatives want to survive this era, it is time to trade ideology for pragmatism. Hey, you made it to the end. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe, turn on notifications, and give it a thumbs up. A massive thank you to my channel members and Patreon supporters. You are the backbone of this work. Want to join the crew? Hit the join button below or swing by Patreon. I'd love to have you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.